One.
Hey.
Welcome. Oh. Welcome, Morning Minutes with myself, Michael Bergio, Mark Novak, coming live, episode 201, talking about arrears, end of lease, termination, vacant properties, residential, commercial. When do we start looking for a new tenant? Arrears is big, especially now, Mark?
Everyone's talking. Well, we got how many weeks till 1st of September? We're coming 5-6 weeks away from that. And people are really, really concerned about how the economy, how people are going to survive. And so mortgage arrears is going to go a bit, potentially go a bit skew-if. Commercial tenant arrears are going to go a bit skew-if. And residential tenant arrears are going to go a bit skew-if. Question is, how much has been stuffed into people's coffers while they've had this landlords having mortgage-free periods and tenants having rents reduced? How much have they stuffed into their coffer for later?
Yeah, so first, that's that. So basically, the no termination, the subsidy, all that ends. Is that 1st of September, Mark, is it?
Yeah. It's a
And
good point. You haven't been able to ask a tenant to leave a property until 1st of September. So a lot of vacates are coming up potentially.
Yeah. And good morning, Nikki, Lisa, Luke. Let's go. It's good to have you all on this beautiful morning. So I reckon, well, general rule of thumb, I learned sort of early days from a lot of key landlords who, especially with commercial arrears, sort of rule on thumb, as bad as it sounds, was really that 2-month period, 1 month. When you sort of get to that type of arrears, that's when you're in a real big danger area. Because it's very hard for them to catch up. And what's your feel on residential? Like, putting away legislation on what you can do, just in your experience, when do you find it's a bit of a danger period where a lot of tenants, once they get there, they just don't catch up, and you need to look at other strategies to ease in the burden, you could say?
Look, it's weeks. We had, through COVID, we had about we've got over 1,500 tenants, and we had about 55 tenants qualify for job keeper, where they wanted to have their rent adjusted through this period. So surprisingly, not a big number. Not a big number, surprisingly. Now, some landlords did it without helped tenants without that qualification of job that weren't on the JobKeeper program. So there was a bit more than that. But I reckon once you get to about 2 weeks as a tenant, because it's a cash flow question, you've not only got to come up with your regular payment, but you got to come up with extra payment. So potentially, if you go bad for 6 months, the next 6 months you're going to double. I mean, bad as in zero. The next 6 months your rent's going to be double.
Because rent's usually 20 to 30% of your income, and if you don't pay it 1 week, then in theory it's 60% of your income, and you've still got other bills. So something's got to give.
And there's not many businesses that profit that much to be able to make that move.
Yeah. And so 55 qualified, but I reckon there would have been a couple hundred apply, especially, or at least say they qualified, wouldn't it, Mark? There was a lot of people just saying.
About half. I reckon we probably had in terms of phone calls, emails, we probably had about a third to a half of the portfolio make requests to the landlords. And then, a lot of the landlords just wanted to see proof and paperwork, which didn't come through.
Yeah. Okay. So with arrears, what's then advice with now? When do you start? Let's maybe go commercial to start with, and when would you start looking for a tenant? Or let's say you've got a tenant in that couple months out there. What are some options you've seen landlords do, or what would you recommend?
Look, I think as a landlord, there's no issue overlapping your tenancy, so you don't have to. I was at a landlord's property on Friday, and they strongly felt about the tenant moving out before they started even advertising, and they strongly felt that works get done to the property before they even started to advertise it. I think the more you can overlap as a landlord from your new tenancy looking at the property to your old tenancy living in the property and moving out of the property, I think the more you can actually overlap, the better it is to you to increase your chances to find the right tenant at the right price. But landlords are a bit funny that way.
Yeah, and yeah, they are. It's almost like they want one before they start one thing, they want one to be over, but that's not the best. But I think, first of all, communication is the most important thing when it comes to vacancy, end of lease, termination, or anything. Communication with your owner, agent, and tenant will solve 80% of the issues or worrying will be communication. Now, a big strategy that a lot of, I think more so in commercial than residential, owners are really willing to work with the tenants and come to a solution through a communication, and that could be a payment plan, a structure that way, mainly because with commercial market could be 1 month, 6 months, 12 months to locate a new tenant.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit unlike residential, where it's just like kick them out and we'll find a new one in 2 weeks, because some of our vacancy can be 0 to 14 days, but it's pretty quick. So sometimes it is a little bit like, let's rip the Band-Aid off that one and get a new one in, sort of thing. But with commercial, it can be quite hard to find a tenant. So you really want to know there's no chance there before you rip the Band-Aid off and kick them out. Now, one thing a lot of owners do, where as soon as there's been acknowledgement that they're struggling, then they will have that communication with the tenant and say, hey, we want you to stay, but it could take 6 months to find a new tenant. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the property for lease, start communicating with other tenants, see if there's someone to take it. Now, if this is done wrongly, it can piss off the tenant, blow up the deal, and they just leave. And if it's done correctly, everybody's happy. Now,
it's delicate.
It's very, very delicate. Now, and I'll give you an example of it done wrongly. They're in arrears 2 months. There's been no communication, and then next week there's a full lease sign on the front, and it's up for advertisement, and there's been no communication. Then the tenant feels like, well, F you, you don't even care. I'm just going to leave. That's wrong. Or they dig their heels in, and then it's very hard to get them out, and they go, well, this is the legislation. You got to do this. You got to do this. And they make it very difficult. They don't give access for new tenants. Now, where a way I've had great dialogue and experience is, one is the acknowledgement. You're in arrears, you're in arrears. You've got to acknowledge it. And then it goes, well, we would like you to stay. We want to work with you, but we've also got to be working in the worst case scenario, finding a new tenant. Now, the way I've seen landlords and how I give reassurance is we say to them, let's say we do get a great offer to take the property. We're going to come to you first and give you the opportunity to cover your arrears or catch up and basically meet your lease and do good that way, rather than saying goodbye, here's termination, we found a new tenant. We're going to give you that opportunity. And that really makes people feel better, because one, they sort of feel like, well, it's going to be pretty hard to find a tenant, so I've got time. But if you do find a tenant, because I have many properties, you think it's going to take 6 months, and then next week you've got a tenant. You give them the last opportunity, because you sort of say, you've been a great tenant up until now. We understand you spent a lot of money here. We don't want to do wrong by you, but we need to also look out for the owner's best interest. And I find, Mark, that little delicate conversation, that communication can really set the tone through this difficult period, not just for the tenants, but also the owners. They're both struggling. Like, a lot of the time, this income is the owner's income. So both are hurting.
You got to, and I think as an owner and as a tenant, I think cash flows are really, really, everyone's focused on the rent now, the rent now, the rent now, the rent now. How much is the rent now, the rent now? But the cash flow is just as critical. And how many landlords I would speak with probably happens more on the residential side than the commercial side. But how many landlords I speak with that are just fixated with the rental figure. Vacancy is so important in terms of cash flow. Vacancy, arrears is so important in terms of cash flow. Quality of tenant is so important in terms of the cash flow, because if they're not a good tenant, they're not going to generate the cash flow. So as a landlord, I urge all landlords to have a good look over your numbers and amortize them over a year, because I think that the advanced landlords are very good at doing that. They will look at that. And another thing that, and make no mistake, this is not a property manager's job. This is a salesperson's job. And so a great property manager can be a bit of a salesperson as well, which is a rare animal. But a great salesperson will also consider that the ability to pay that, rent back, the potential vacancy, the relet cost. Landlord straight away the vacancy, if that property is vacant for if it's residential and it's vacant for 3 or 4 weeks, you got a 1 week letting fee for the property. You've got some marketing or advertising on that. That's all, and it's a bugger. It's a bugger. And when tenants have to move in, another thing people have got to consider is when tenants have to move in, guess what? They've got to give notice where they're moving out of.
Yeah.
So often they're not going to jump into a residential property that same day that they've signed a lease. They often want to give 3 weeks notice of where they're moving out of. Or with commercial, they want to give 3 months notice of where they're moving out of to do a fit out.
Yeah, and you're exactly right with there a lot of landlords. Now, if you look at the commercial example, let's just say, for example, the tenant needs 20% off for a month or two. Let's say COVID, for example, it's happened. They just need that sort of relief. When you really look at the cost of finding a new tenant and the vacancy, commercial 6-month vacancy, you've got this letting fees a lot more substantial than residential. It's normally 10% of the first year's rent. So if you're taking a $100,000 lease, that's $10,000. 6-month vacancy is worth $50,000, and that could. And sometimes you may just do a deal on that rental figure to keep the tenant in there as well. But also, Mark, I tell you what really struggles with owners sometimes. The owners, they keep the property vacant because they're trying to hit this figure, and they're sometimes not looking at how long it's empty for, and they just want $650 a week. Like it's some, it's. I think that's the vacancy. Yeah. I think that people don't look at it as much as they should with that vacancy and days on market.
They don't. And look, the reason I've got that's the reason I've got the arse behind me. There he is. There's the pussycat and there's the arse, because some people are asses. I'll tell you where there was some other people that are asses with tenants, which ruined it for the tenants that were genuinely affected, is people that genuinely didn't qualify. A lot of commercial tenants or a lot of residential tenants, the government made it really clear that if you're affected by a certain percentage, then you do have the ability to ask and potentially get some sort of rent reduction. Now, the amount of people that actually ruined it for the other people or made it hard in the industry was a bit ridiculous. So there were, I think, a lot of tenants tried it on for size, didn't qualify, but that took all our attention away from the people that actually needed it real fast. Yeah. So unfortunately, it took up a lot of resources.
And unfortunately, like I've heard the example of a couple of businesses now going out of business because they didn't get as much help as they needed from a landlord, or the landlord didn't want to, and now they're closing up doors. Because the one thing, unfortunately, I stress to a lot of people out there, the commercial market's been been very hard for the last 12 months, and retail and the economy. Our interest rates are low, not because economy is good. Our interest rates are low because business retail is not that strong, and that relates to small businesses. And I think majority of landlords were really understanding and tried to work with tenants, but there were some, Mark, that were very tough. And now I've seen those tenants, they close up shop. And it's disappointing because you're right. A lot of people asked when they didn't need it. And that really hurts a lot of people who do need it. Because normally the most loudest voices, normally the louder voices are the people who don't need it. And the people who really do are the quietest. They're struggling in silence.
Yeah, look, it's amazing. And another thing, guys and girls, like it's something that got any questions out there?
Just Lisa Berg, great information, very informative. Thank you very much, Lisa. You're a star. You're always coming on. Luke Maroney, cash buffer, super important. Then we've got DY areas shouldn't be as affected as is more affordable, question mark. I think everyone was affected in all different ways. I think probably the more, DY's got a lot of tourists. We've got a lot of young demographic, 25 to 35, and a lot of them are studying, working hospitality. So it was pretty, I think it was, DY was just as much as affected, but the rental levels were at a level that JobKeeper, you could do a bit of both, where you could still pay rent and eat, where if you're in a property that you're paying $2,000 a week in rent, JobKeeper did nothing for you. It's $600, doesn't even cover half the week, where there's a lot, that sort of medium price. On most of the northern beaches, a lot of people think DY is cheap, but it's Northern Beaches is very even, Mark. If you look at a two-bedder in DY, two-bedder in Queenscliff, two-bedder in Freshie, two-bedder in Narrabeen, it's really quite even across the board.
Even when you look at other parts of Sydney, like I was in Rhodes the other day, and there was a fairly new one-bedder full rent. A client's son just rented $500 a week. It's fairly consistent with what we're paying as well, and that's Rhodes. So no, it's interesting. But guys, another thing as well with these businesses that have been affected. Some of them have been affected because they've just purely been shut down as an industry.
Yeah.
Some of them have been affected because people's habits have permanently changed. And retail is something that people's habits have been changing for probably a good 10 years now.
Yeah.
And COVID amplified those habit changes even more so. I know Lisa had an experience the other day in a I think it was David Jones or Myer. And she's buying some work shoes, and she said, "Oh, could I try these?" And they said, "Oh no, that's a different section. It's over there. That's over there." So she walked over there, and she's waiting there 5 minutes, and then she's another lady going past, and she said, "Oh, excuse me, I just wanted to see if you've got this size." And she said, "Actually, I don't work in this section." And it's like. Really? And then they're having a meeting. There's about 8 of them, 10 of them having a meeting huddled over in the corner. Lisa walks over and rips a new arsehole out of it. And she says, "Excuse me, what are you training for?" And they said, and then they looked at her and she said, "Are you training for customer service?" And they said, "Yeah, well, that's part of the conversation." And then she ripped it. And the point of the conversation was, I could have just gone online and bought this on my couch.
Yeah.
You know,
why
would I turn up here? Because guess what the lady said? Even when she finally did get service, the lady said, "No, we don't have that size, but we may have it in another store.
Yeah.
Would you like me to get them in?" And I think we've all heard that before.
Yeah, all the time.
Right. So, and I was saying, Elise, how it should go is, yes, I'll just take your payment for that, and they can be delivered to your home within 24 hours. Right?
You're exactly right.
That's a retailer.
Exactly right.
That is a retailer that has not moved with the times, that is suffering, that is crying COVID. And I'm saying that's not a COVID problem.
Yeah.
So, and then they're going into arrears, and they're not paying, and they're asking landlords to negotiate. just because they haven't pivoted their business to accommodate the customer. It's like, come on.
That
Ridiculous.
is, yeah, that's a little hack for anyone in retail, because you're exactly right. You're there to
Take the payment, deliver the item to the person's door. What do you mean it's in another store? You know, come back. How long to get it?
It's like, I don't care where it is, order it. When you order online, you don't know where it comes from. You just want it there.
We'll have it delivered to your home tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like what? And you're in the store. You're there. You've chosen what you want. You know the size that you're going to fit. And it's like, but now all the landlords like Westfields and I know people don't cry for the big guys like that, but they're all getting it. All those landlords are getting nailed because the retailers are not pivoting.
Yep.
And it's not COVID.
Nicky Bark has asked, what if your commercial tenant has shut down totally? Do they have to pay? Same thing. Great question. So, and Nicky, I'll send you a link to Mark and I did a great show on this as well. But the way the legislation was for commercial tenants, if you are closed, you get 100% discount on, you get 100%, you don't have to pay 100% of your rent. However, you will have to pay back 50% of the rent, and you get 2 years to pay it back. So during the period you're closed, like a gym, and you cannot operate, you pay no rent. But then
it's not a closing. Just to qualify that, it's not a closing question. It's a zero revenue.
Yeah, it's a revenue question. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
So if you've got 0% revenue, you pay zero rent, but you will be paying back 50%. So unfortunately, the landlord does cop a 50% in the bin, and their tenants will pay, and they've got 2 years to pay that back, and you can't evict them for those arrears either. 2-year payment plan.
So back to the core of the topic, which is where would a landlord start advertising that property for a tenant possibly vacating, or how does that work? Because that's assuming the tenant's going to stay, Michael.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
How does that work?
Communication. Just as much as you don't like your tenant in arrears, 99% of them, neither do they. And if they don't feel there's a hope of recouping, then they may look to find a smaller property or do something else. So the communication would be, you can't just market and kick them out because of it, but you can with their opinion, with their approval. Even though a lot of tenants couldn't be evicted, a lot of tenants were still moving, Mark. They were seeing properties with great value, and and they realized they may not be able to afford that property, or they can get a better property for less. A lot of people were moving. We leased like 50 properties last month for residential, and we're having one of our biggest months this month for commercial. So it is huge. There are people out there, but it just has that communication, which is the biggest thing.
That's it. Well, that's a take. Have a lovely day, everyone. Michael, and it's interesting times. Hey, advertising your property that's vacant, that's coming up for vacancy. Our message is start as early as possible and heavily communicate with your tenant to see if they can stay. They may stay. It's not a good thing, particularly that they're going. So they may stay. You may work with them. Please consider how long it's going to be vacant for. Please consider the quality of your next tenant that's going to come in. Please consider the, what was the other things we mentioned?
The rent, they're the main things. The vacancy, the market rent may not be the rent they're paying. That's the biggest thing as well. So you may be so quick to throw them out, but you were getting $650, and now it could be $500. So that's a big thing you need to factor it all in.
The master stroke commercial.
The marketing to find a tenant as well, Mark. Your letting fee, the marketing, the vacancy, the market rent, all of it needs to be considered.
And the master stroke guys and girls that we've seen our commercial, clever commercial landlords do is they've assisted the tenants that have qualified for JobKeeper, and they've extended the term of the lease. That's the kicker.
That's the kicker. All righty, guys. Thank you for joining our 201 episode of Morning Minutes.
Love ya.
Thank you. Cheers all. Bye.
Bye.